All right. Well, hi, LinkedIn. My name is Paul, and this is Bethany over there. We're here to talk today about a really hot topic in the infosec industry. It's ransomware. I think we all have seen the multiple news stories and the growing impact that ransomware gangs and frankly businesses are having on assets, particularly in the United States, but all around the world as well. And as such, we figured it would be a good time to get people into a room and have a little talk about how we think about ransomware and what it is and how you can change your view around it to be better prepared to deal with it. Bethany?
Yeah, so when I was a SOC analyst not that long ago, one of the questions I was always asked was, well, how do you prepare for ransomware and how do you respond to it? And being a SOC analyst at the time, I was like, that is such a hard question to answer because back then we weren't really thinking of in the mindset of how do you prevent these things from happening. It's more of how do you respond to these things. So you want to shift away from how do you respond to them in an incident response standpoint and more of how do you prevent these things. So now that I'm in threat intelligence and away from the SOC, that question is answerable. And that's pretty much what we'll be talking about here.
Right. So one of the things that that I think we have a problem with the traditional way of thought with defenses, with cybersecurity in particular, is we like to think of our enterprise or our network or whatever boundaries you have as a castle we're trying to defend, right? So one of the things that puts us into is actually sort of a siege mentality, and that's a problem. When we're in that mentality, we're defending those edges of those walls, but at that point you're really stuck inside that network, right? You're stuck inside that boundary, and being able to defend those assets is good, and we have to be good at that. But it's kind of the wrong way to think of the battlefield we're on for this. Really, this is more of a timeline that we're on. The greatest asset the attackers have right now is the time they have once they establish persistence in a network. So when we think about this, you really have two kill chains here, two timelines you're following. One is a botnet delivery, right? When the botnet is delivered to the network, and then it may go dormant for a period of time, is what we normally see. But they have anywhere between 11 to 42 days on average. And I know that's a wide range for an average, but it's what we see. They have 11 to 42 days to prepare an attack. And that time period gives them the luxury of being able to plan and prepare. Our job really is to reduce that amount of time they have to plan these attacks, right? That's the greatest luxury a ransomware gang has right now, to deliver a payload to your network and defeat you. We tend to rely too much on just endpoint defense. And sometimes even just SIM and endpoint defense isn't enough, right? It's good, but these things are dormant, they're tricky, they're quiet. So the next step is to be able to push back up that timeline and get them outside of the castle walls, and take away that luxury of time that they have to be able to plan their attack. We have a system here at VerSprite we've developed. We use it internally in the threat intel group, that is called BreachSeeker, that kind of does this. There are other options out there for similar things, but the idea is to be able to do detection from outside of a customer's organization or network, right? So we can farm metadata on botnet infections and then use that information to inform customers that there are machines that are running this botnet in your environment, and we need to take care of them as quickly as possible. That allows us to take away the lion's share of that time they have to prepare an attack for that organization. In cases like that, we're pushing them back up that timeline and further away from that castle wall that we all think about, right? We're pushing them out beyond that wall And the idea is, as they get beyond that wall, you're taking away that luxury of time, that ease of action they have and planning, and forcing them to act faster, which will, at some point, of course, become an evolutionary pressure on them to get faster and better at what they do. And we'll have to adapt when we get there. But right now, taking away that time is the best way we have to defend against an effective capability of the aggressor. So that's really what I want people to think about a little differently when we talk about this. The other thing here is that putting yourself in the mindset of we're already hit. We don't know when it's going to happen, but let's assume, because these botnets exist, that we're already hit somewhere down this timeline. That ransomware is out there, it's already happened. We just don't know it yet. When you think in that fashion, instead of hoping that your EDR catches it and stops it, when you think in that fashion, you put yourself in the position of being able to hunt instead of being able to be reactive, right? So if you assume the worst is going to happen down the road, and I know that sounds negative, but bear with me. If you assume that ransomware strike is happening, you're okay, right? That puts you in the position of knowing this is coming. And that means that you are able to listen and respond effectively before you get to the point of getting hit with the ransomware. Puts you in a hunter's stance, in a hunter's mindset, and gets you in the place where you can actually operate on this more effectively.
Now, speaking of the hunter's mindset, I know a lot of people are going to be curious about how they can do this for incident response planning or their SOC employees of that nature. When you think about this in a SOC environment, let's say you have an alert that comes in, you have one of your machines, one of your systems, just any system, is reaching out to an IP address that you don't know about. Now, usually a SOC employee would go in to like virus total, they would run the reputation on this IP address. Maybe it comes back as false, right? There's nothing on it. However, what you would then want to do instead of just closing that, thinking in a hunter's mindset, is now pivoting on that system to see if it's reaching out to any other addresses that are weird, or if it's trying to ping the other systems on the network, because that's a really good indicator right there that it's attempting to spread.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and being able to, I mean, we've got to be good at all the things we're already doing, right? I'm not saying that what we're talking about replaces any of the tactics, techniques that we use, tactics or techniques that we use internally in any organization. You still have to be good at EDR. You still have to be good at your SOC and your SIM, right? You still have to be able to detect and respond to those items. We just need to get to the point where we have more aggressive blue teams, right? And I'm not suggesting hacking back. That's not the point of this at all, but implementing new systems that are able to push your defenses further away from the core assets that you're trying to defend is really key. It's what actually makes up security in depth, right? I mean, layers of security are it. And this is just one more that pushes you out further away from the goal for them, right? I mean, if you're only relying on your EDR, you've got one layer of protection, one. And it's bypassable. That's the reality of it. We look at ransomware gangs like Revil, who's been in the news a lot lately. But I mean, they have active bypasses for almost every major antivirus and EDR out there that they're capable of using. So if they can detect what your antivirus is, and they can, then they'll be able to bypass that. So that EDR layer is good and you need it. You absolutely have to have it, but it's only one layer and it is defeatable. Well, what about the next layer? SIM, source solutions, things like that, where you're doing detection, automated response, perhaps, SOC analysts watching what's going on. It's great. You need that too, because that gives you an earlier detection of this activity potentially. I mean, it needs to be there. You need to be doing it. But if no one's eyes catch it or it doesn't set off an alert, well, then you still may not notice it. So pushing out further from there and getting that early warning system in place, like BreachSeeker, that gives you even more power, because once again, BreachSeeker is not infallible. It's only able to pull from certain assets and certain information stores. So, we may not catch everything, but it's one more layer that's further away from that core asset you're trying to defend, that's further out there, that is actually predictive of what's coming instead of reactive, right? You're bridging, you're crossing that bridge from being a reactive organization to being a predictive one that can look at threats and say, all right, this looks legit. We need to do something before it gets out of hand. And that is a much more comfortable place to be than where most of us are today. So agreed.
Yeah, so one of the great things about Paul's article, if no one has had the chance to look at it, it's available on the VerSprite.com webpage. Just click on blog and then you'll be able to view it. There's some really good graphics in there that show the timelines of ransomware and how we're responding to it. So currently, think of the timeline like this, right? And think of this right here being the end, the stage, right? The ransomware infection. And this right here is before it happens. So where we're currently operating at is about right here, right? So in Paul's graphic, it shows this is the ransomware infection. This is where we're operating at. And you can see that the timeline is it's very small. You don't have a lot of time to react to that. In this idea of acting like a hunter, you're no longer operating right here in a time scale of like this, where this is a ransomware infection. You're now operating closer to right about here, which you can see gives you quite a bit more time to react.
The thing I find interesting about getting into that stance and into that preparation mode is that you get to a place where you don't necessarily have to react immediately, right? And this is the same value when advanced EDR started hitting somewhere around 2015. This is the same value proposition from them when they came along, because I remember very clearly several vendors would say things like, well, it doesn't really matter if you delete the infected file from the machine because we've already stopped it and it's not going to execute, which is true. And it does change your mindset about how you can operate, which means instead of having to worry about it getting quarantined and you have to deal with a quarantine, you can deal with it on your own time. And that's very powerful for a overworked and perhaps underfunded security team at an organization, right? And this does that same thing. If you have a detection earlier in the process, you can watch it for a while. You don't have to necessarily jump right on it. I'm not saying you shouldn't. I mean, there's always risk in doing so, but you have the luxury of studying it a little bit and watching its behavior before you take action. And that is a powerful thing, because ultimately in threat intel, that's what we do. We monitor, we detect, we figure out what the likely next steps of an attacker are, do our best to predict them, and then act on that information to defend assets of our clients. So it gives you more luxury of time because you're taking it away from the aggressor, right? It gives you that same luxury of time that you now have to use against them. It's simple. It's just like, and I really hate anytime quotes Sun Tzu in an article like this, but it really does apply here. It's one of those where you get to choose your battlefield. You really do. If you invest appropriately and you build out your infrastructure appropriately, and then you put your defenses in place, you can choose a battlefield that's beyond your borders. And if you can do that, you should, because it's better to have that fight out there in the void than it is inside your network, right? If they're already inside and attacking you, then you're you're on your back foot already. You're already taking a punch. So try to detect as early as possible, take away that luxury time, and own your defenses. Frankly, put them outside, so you can fight them there instead of inside.
And the beautiful thing about having more time is when you're in a reactionary state of mind, you're going to mess up. Like it's just a given, and you might still mess up still. You might still miss something. But this takes away the percentage that you're likely to mess up by giving you more time so you can do something more thorough. So one of the people I work with, very smart guy, the brains behind BreachSeeker, he says always that time is your most important thing, right? It's never something you're going to get back. And in the case of time, if you take your time doing something, you can be more thorough about it, which is more valuable than responding to something quickly. So even if you do respond to something quickly and you stop the spread of infection, you might still be leaving something behind, which is what we've seen recently with a lot of recent reinfections. You know, people are coming out with news lines that are saying this has been hit and is spreading ransomware. And well, they've been hit before, and what may have happened is that they just didn't have the time before to really take care of it. Where in this case, we're hoping to prevent those reinfections.
Right. Yeah, it's all about the early detection, right? The less time they have to set up a plan on how they're going to most efficiently attack you, is more time you have to figure out how to defend against that attack, right? So eliminating that threat early, and honestly, there's two sides to this. You're taking pressure off of your response team, whoever that is, which is very helpful, because that pressure piece, like you said, Bethany, makes bad decisions happen, right? People get in a hurry. They want to react. Everybody has fight or flight that kind of kicks in whenever they get into these situations. You're reducing the amount of that, so better decision making comes along in that in the defense decision making process, right? And the other thing is getting that time back from the aggressor helps. Overall, you've got now time to do the study. I mean, how often have we gone in, and I know you'll know exactly where I'm going with this, Bethany, but how often have we gone into a client's environment and we've detected whatever it is, and their immediate reaction is just kill it now, and we're like, wait,
We want to study it. Yeah.
we need to study this for a little bit before we just take action. And it's counterintuitive, right? It's counterintuitive
Well,
to people that are in that moment, especially.
the thing about studying it is we're not doing it just because it's interesting to us. We're doing it because it can reveal more things about your system.
Mhm.
So if it's, let's say you didn't know you had vulnerabilities that, God forbid, you should know about the vulnerabilities that exist. But let's say there's a 0 day, for example, that exists in your system, and it starts pivoting around and you're like, what is this thing doing? Well, suddenly you're now aware about a 0 day that you didn't know about before. So that's the value of studying it.
Right. That and frankly, you'll find out more about what they've been able to find out about you, period, right? Across the board. You'll be able to see, you're more likely to be able to detect what they've figured out about your network, what they're trying to do, where, like you said, where weaknesses lie, on and on. There's a lot of good value to watching that actor as long as you can. Once again, there's a point at which that has to stop. I get it. I'm not saying that we let them stay longer than we can, but you watch them and gather that information. You learn a lot about that aggressor. You might even be able to tie together an identity. That's happened before, right? It's really all this forensics data. As long as they don't know they're being watched, they're going to do things that they think they can get away with because they're not being watched. Well, don't play your hand necessarily first thing, and that's that's kind of the same mindset here, right? When you get to that hunter mindset, you you don't want to be prey, right? It comes down to the old parable of the predator, right? If a hunter is in the woods and there's a bear, that bear is not afraid of the hunter with his gun. That bear will attack the hunter because that's a puny human. Well, sure, because that bear has no prey instinct, right? It has no idea that it can be hunted because it is an apex predator. These guys make a lot of those same mistakes when they do these things. There's a lot of ego involved here often, that can drive them to make mistakes because they believe they can't be hunted, right? They believe they're stealthy enough or quiet enough because they think they're an apex predator. Whether they realize that or not, they behave that way. So applying that same mindset plays here, right? So once you stepped into that hunter role and you kind of let go of the prey instinct you may have, you're able to more effectively confront these threats.
And I know people, when they think about advanced persistent threats and they think about ransomware, they're like, there's nothing really to be done about it because these are APT groups and this is ransomware. Well, it's just not true. The reason why ransomware is so powerful is because there isn't really a strategic attempt to prevent it. So you might be using your EDR, like Paul had said, and that's one thing, but defense in depth, or in this case, thinking like a hunter, it's very important because you can take away that end state, that impactfulness of ransomware that's having. We're seeing an increase in ransomware right now because there's not really steps being taken to effectively prevent it.
Yeah, I mean, all of our defenses we put in place for the past few years are still there, and they do a pretty good job, right? I mean, any of the low-hanging fruit, theoretically, in a well-defended environment will be stopped. But advanced persistent threats are a whole different ballgame. I mean, look at Revel, right? Well, I don't know that that's their name anymore. They ransomware yesterday. I'm sorry. But look at them, right? I mean, you're looking at a organization that is run like a business. This is a business. They have marketing, they have customer service, they have affiliate programs, they have all these things. This is a business, and quite a profitable one too over the past couple of years. But in the case of advanced persistent threats like this, they are well funded, and when the ransom gets paid, they are more well funded. And their disappearance yesterday is, likely not a legal action. It's more along the lines they're buying new infrastructure and rebranding because they got too much heat. There's too much attention to them right now. So, when you look at them and you understand they run just like a business, their structure is less a gang, as they're often described as, or less an organized crime syndicate, and more just like a legitimate business. So, when you think about that, and you think about ransomware as a service in particular, and you look at, for example, the Kaseya attack, we were shocked by that one. I think everybody was, but we were particularly shocked because our early warning systems didn't detect this, and it was huge. We should have seen it. But then it came out a few hours later that effectively Revel had used them as the botnet, and so metadata wouldn't come out of that because it's a legitimate use MSP tool, right? Supply chain attacks, we've seen a rise in those this year. I mean, SolarWinds just got hit again a few days ago, right? And after last year, you would think that would be pretty hard to do, but it turns out, when you have a lot of assets, they're hard to defend. There's always going to be some sort of way in. So, figuring out ways to do detection, figuring out ways that do detection beyond what's on your network, right, are pretty key at this point to actually being able to mount an effective response to these things. I think that's about all I have to say, really. But it's key to start thinking about ways that you can push those defenses beyond the walls that you have now, whether those walls be cloud or on-prem or whatever. We can defend all that. We know that's well defined. We know it. Really, it's key to start doing detection beyond that. And so, you're able to get an early warning system in place and respond effectively, more effectively than we've seen recently. And that's really what we're trying to do at VerSprite and what we're trying to help everybody else get to. All right. Oh, we got people asking questions. Somebody just pinged me on that one.
Let me see. Oh, okay. So here's one. Does the ransomware as a service prevalence make things easier or more sophisticated to deal with?
I think their model is actually simpler than what we've seen in the past, but they're far more effective at hitting a wide swath of assets, right? So I think it makes it more difficult overall because the response to it when they have a success is a much larger response in general. You're seeing entire organizations.
Well, they're more organized.
Yeah.
Ransomware as a service is far more organized than just your typical ransomware infection.
Well, and the other thing is it gives the actor a bit of a proxy, right? So we always think about this in forensics. when you're trying to figure out who the actor is, and they've come through VPNs and anonymizing proxies, and you really don't have a trail for them unless they had an accidental DNS leak, right?
Right.
So this is kind of that same thing, but it's a physical world identity proxy, really, right? You're looking at a group that's providing ransomware as a service that has threat actors that that may even be part of your organization. I mean, let's say, for example, and I haven't actually seen this reported anywhere yet, although I suspect we'll have it at some point in the near future. Let's think for a second that someone who is an employee at a company that is a bad actor, that it's an insider threat, wants to, so, I mean, look at these supply chain attacks. Those are perfect examples of where this would be a possible scenario. They have their fingers in networks all over the globe, right? And they've got a grudge with their employer, and they go to Revel, just as an example, not calling you out, Revel, I know it's not your name anymore. But they go to a ransomware as a service gang and they say, okay, I have admin access on these networks. I can get your botnet in, you know, and you get 30% of the cut, I get 70% of the cut when they pay out. This sounds great. Let's do it. Well, that's really what it enables. That's the kind of scenarios that we see that they're still the same old. I mean, it's like all cybercrime. I mean, these are the same old crimes that have been around for thousands of years, just a new way to do them, right? And so that's the kind of activity that I suspect we'll see come to light in the coming months. You know, I've not seen that specific scenario played out, Jeff, but I think it's likely we will. I think the ransomware as a service really adds value to their business model, if you will, because they're able to basically do an app store for ransomware. I mean, they get 30% of the cut, whoever gets the 70 or whatever that split looks like.
The beneficial thing about ransomware as a service is that, I need to be careful how I say this because we're live and I don't want to get legally in trouble. It is easier to track what they are doing. Yes, that is the careful way of putting it.
Their tactics, techniques, and procedures are consistent, usually. Okay. We will see a change in those tactics, techniques, and procedures occasionally, and it'll be a sea change when it happens, or it'll be kind of like what we saw with the Kaseya situation. It'll be a one-time thing, right, where you'll have somebody else's network uses the botnet. That's not normal, and that would not be normal. They would have to have access to multiple MSPs to be able to do that repeatedly. So that's a limited capability. Yeah, very much so. It gives you, it makes it easier to deal with them from that perspective because they're consistent. Anything else? Anybody?
I think that was it. That's the only question. Yep.
Well, everybody in LinkedIn land, thanks for showing up today and listen to us ramble about ransomware. If there's anything interesting, you got questions to follow up with, feel free to message myself or Bethany or reach out to VerSprite, and we'll be happy to answer questions and try to help as best we can. We wish you luck out there, and you know, we hope you don't have to deal with a new ransomware as a service gang that's just a new name, right? All right. Well, we'll talk to you guys later. Thanks.